Welcome to the Agents Angle for what is the final scheduled episode of 2024, where we await what could be a very unpredictable January transfer window for many, just around the corner. With me, Jonathan Booker.
Me, Peter Paleologus. In this episode, we look at an interesting development for football and agents, as whilst yet another football association announced their new domestic agent regulations, another association introduced its own form of digital IDs for agents.
Plus, we will also be looking back on some of the commentary from within the agent community over the last year, as well as look at some agents and club disputes, one of which may finally be resolved.
All that to come on this episode of The Agents Angle.
Here we go, the last scheduled episode of the year, and we're recording this a bit more in advance than usual on the 12th of December. And thus we're praying there isn't a flurry of agent-related developments like there were this time last year, with the bewildering developments and announcements relating to the FFAR. Not least, as away from doing the Agents Angle, we have other commitments, both professional and personal. You have your work commitments to focus on, Peter, and for me there are a couple of lawyers and agents who have asked for help with mediation and mediation clauses for football contracts. But also, we're getting asked to assist agents, clubs, lawyers, and even associations on football agent matters, which is unexpected, but a very nice surprise.
Of course, as agents, we have the January window to work towards, so work never stops. As you said, Jonathan, quite a few agents, agent associations and players are getting in contact to consider new deals, new initiatives, new projects. So it's going to be a very interesting time of the year.
No cry for help yet from FIFA, though. Or maybe I've gone a bit too far this year on the podcast to expect that, no matter how bad things get for them when it comes to agent-related matters. But one bit of good news we had this week was that after being nominated for a Sports Podcast Award, we've now been informed we are a finalist in the Best Sports Business Podcast category. So the link will be in the show notes, and if those listening could vote for us, it would be very much appreciated. But I think it's safe to say we are outsiders and up against some very tough competition. But then again, Leicester City managed to beat the odds, so why not us?
Yes, it's an honor to be nominated. A lot of good sports business podcasts are out there. Jonathan, we are niche at the Agents Angle. So it's great to be nominated. It's an honor. And for those out there who want to vote for us, we'll be happy to accept your vote in this competition. But overall, fantastic achievement, Jonathan.
And as it's the last episode of 2024, there are a couple of loose ends, so to speak, that we wanted to try and tidy up, from matters that have dragged on throughout the year, or we just haven't been able to cover them, of which there are many. And one story we mentioned a few weeks ago in episode 48 was the dispute between an agent and Manchester United over agent commissions relating to a loan move by one of United's former players. And with that story, we touched upon another Premier League agent dispute that was reported at around the same time. But unfortunately, we didn't have time to cover that one, which we believe was seemingly between a player and an agent, or even two agents.
Yes, Jonathan, we're talking about the article, I would say, uncomfortable lawsuit for Daniel Munoz, agent claims transfer fee debts. Daniel Munoz, a key player for the Colombian national team and Crystal Palace, is playing in the Premier League, is facing a lawsuit over a delayed payment of a commission related to his transfer. The lawsuit comes from Ruben Saicedo, a football agent who claims that he played a crucial role in securing Munoz's move to Crystal Palace. Despite, and we know Juan Pablo Angel, a famous Colombian player, being officially listed as the representative of Munoz. Caicedo states in this article that he worked with another agent, I believe he's Scottish, to close the deal in January, which led to a positive transfer. The dispute, in essence, is on commission payment. Caicedo claiming that when the deal was closed, he was informed by the sporting director, I believe of Crystal Palace, that funds had been deposited into designated accounts. Caicedo says he never received any money, so he's taking legal actions for funds that weren't received. However, this article emphasizes the importance of something else, that is signed documents in securing payments for your agent work, an agent who plays a significant role in transfers. Now, with the article, I believe he didn't have any documentation in England in terms of a mandate in relation to this deal. If that's the case, that's unbelievable. And the other thing is, I'm surprised because if he's an experienced agent, the FA, the Football Association, is a template or subcontracts that agents can use between themselves, and that will also cover commission payments. I just don't get it. Is it sloppiness? Is it a culture thing, not to work with paperwork? I don't know. Or is it trust, that you have trust and you get paid? But really concerning, you do a great deal like this and you don't have paperwork, Jonathan.
Well, if it smells like a fish, looks like a fish, it probably is a fish. And this one looks, smells, and sounds very fishy to me. The one comment or quote in the article that jumps out at me is where the agent, contesting the matter, says, "This leaves a bad experience knowing we can't operate without signed documents, even when we have secured the team." Well, tough. If you can't do what is in the regulations, and for me, arguably good business practice in whatever industry, in having all the paperwork, don't be surprised when it goes wrong. Yes, I have sympathy for someone who does work and doesn't get paid what they rightly due, but this is why we need effective regulations in this industry to add some structure and try and protect all of those involved. But without that paperwork and paper trail, as you rightly say, Peter, it will be very interesting to see what evidence will be provided to a court. And with that, we don't know which court they are referring to. It can't go to an FA Rule K arbitration process in England, as I don't believe one of the parties in dispute is a licensed FA agent at the time of recording. So, therefore, they are not seen as a football participant by the FA in England. I don't know if they're FIFA licensed, as we don't have a FIFA agent directory anymore. But even if they were a FIFA licensed agent, the agent's chamber is suspended, so there is arguably nowhere to hear such a dispute because this could well turn out to be an agent related dispute with an international dimension.
That is right, Jonathan. There's limited options to take action here. As you said, there's no FIFA agents chamber, so maybe there's option with the national courts. But when you don't have full paperwork which outlines what dispute resolution mechanism you got access to, or maybe what court or tribunal, it's very hard to find a jurisdiction for your case. To sue someone, you need to be able to get access to a tribunal, a court, a chamber that's willing to hear your case. Now, if there's an international dimension, where do you go if FIFA's chamber is not available? You mentioned the FA Rule K arbitration procedure. Maybe the agents don't qualify because of the football participant. That's a very good point. So here you can be in limbo. But why are you in limbo if that's the case? It's because the paperwork may be not in order, and that limits your access to any court or any tribunal. And with the agents chamber not operating, that makes it even more harder. So very difficult situation when you don't have access to, say, justice, Jonathan.
And in a similar vein, another story that's dragged on throughout the year, and we've referred to on several occasions on the agent's angle, is the dispute between the well known agent Saif Ruby and Chelsea, for which the complaint now appears to have been reportedly dropped by the agent against the club. But he seemingly continues his claims and cases against their former chief executive, Marina Granovskaya.
Jonathan, we've covered this story before. Saif Al-Rubi, he's now reported that he's dropped his multi-million dollar pound lawsuit against Chelsea, but continues to claim against the club's former director, Marina Granovskaya. The lawsuit has been filed in London Circuit Commercial Court for unpaid fees for the sale of Kurt Zouma to West Ham in August 2021. I think he's demanding, that's Mr. Al-Rubi, £300,000, and maybe it's more. Now, Chelsea contested this claim that it's been filed incorrectly by Al-Rubi's representatives and argued that the fees are not owed. Now, we know the background of why Al-Rubi's legal action, and there was also threatening emails alleged to Granovskaya, but he continues, that's Al-Rubi, to hold Granovskaya responsible for the breach of contract and therefore seeking legal redress. This is interesting because if Chelsea fall away as a party to the litigation, that leaves her as an officer of Chelsea at the time. Now, to sue a party, you got to know who made the decision and who's responsible. The other thing is, if Chelsea no longer can be sued, that makes it a little bit more difficult, I would say, for Mr. Al-Rubi, because it's about legal standing in the matter. Of course, if he's got evidence of who made the representation and how he's going to be paid, that may be the basis of his case. But football agents, also, we've got to look at the other aspect. It's a dilemma and quandary when you're suing clubs and directors, because if you do sue clubs and you're entitled to what you're owed, that could damage your reputation to other clubs. So, an interesting situation here, Jonathan.
I just think it's a big mess. And in hindsight, I would say that probably a lot of those involved, if not all of those involved, would have preferred to have it resolved behind closed doors without it getting that much coverage because it's not a good look for any of the parties involved. But one quick question I would like to know your thoughts on here, Peter, with regards to this case. We highlighted in the past how this dispute should have gone to an FA Rule K arbitration as it was between football participants. We don't know if the current club ownership at Chelsea have resolved the matter with the agent out of court, but as you said, there's still a dispute here between the agent and the former chief exec. And because they're former chief exec, this makes the latter no longer a football participant, and therefore normal judicial channels may be open as a non football related matter.
It may also come down to, Jonathan, that the timing of when this action was taken. So, if at that time Granite Sky was seen as a football participant, then it could be open to. But I agree that if you're not a football participant, you may have to go just to courts. And that seems to be the case in this matter. I'm sure that Chelsea, to a degree, will indemnify Granite Sky for this action, even though they're out of litigation, it seems. You also have got directors' insurance. A lot of companies, a lot of entities have got directors' insurance which support legal fees. However, for this matter to keep continuing, as you say, it's a mess.
But as we highlighted on the last episode of the agent's angle, there is huge uncertainty, if not confusion, surrounding not just football agent regulations with FFAR, but now also with the RSTP following the Diarra ruling. And this appears to have now been focused on and caught the attention by the High Court in one African country.
Yes, we're going to South Africa again. We've had a guest recently, Glenn from South Africa, but it's an interesting case. It's an ongoing lawsuit between Mamelodi Sundowns, a powerhouse South African club, Pitso Mosimane, former head coach, and the MT Sports, who are the football agency in this matter. And the key issues here is jurisdictional disputes involving agents in South African football. The case centres on a claim by Mamelodi Sundowns for the repayment of part of an agent's commission paid to MT Sports when Mosimane as coach signed for them in 2019. The Sundowns, or the club, argue that a clawback clause in Mosimane's head coach agreement entitles them to recover the agent's commission to Mosimane's because he resigned early from Mamelodi and went to the powerhouse Egyptian club, Al Ahly. So they're looking for money to be returned from the commission. Now, I won't go into much into particulars, but one interesting thing about this case is the Sundowns, the club, is arguing that the High Court of South Africa has jurisdiction and not the South African Professional League's Dispute Resolution Chamber. And they're arguing that this is clear cut in the National Soccer League handbook, I think it is, and also FIFA's updated regulations on agent disputes, be assuming the FIFA Agents Chamber is not available. That's basically the situation. We don't know the full arguments, but I will say this about clawbacks. That's interesting. How a club can get money back from an agent in relation to their fees. This is a very interesting development. Never seen this much in football. Just for our listeners, a clawback is a provision in a contract that is often non-negotiable. We see it in a lot in employment contracts, and that's when there's bonuses and incentive-based pay. So like investment bankers who get big commissions, if they leave, or big bonuses, then they have to pay something back. That's what the clawback is if they leave all of a sudden after receiving their bonuses. This is very interesting. Never seen this much in the agent space about commission fees, but the agent space is evolving. So very interesting case this, and one that we need to follow, Jonathan.
Yeah, looking at it as a non lawyer or legal muggle, as I often refer to it, I think there is possibly a case here that the court has jurisdiction on this particular matter when all things are considered. But that remains dependent on what was written in the initial agreement or contract between the parties in terms of dispute causes. And the reasons I say this are because, one, a lot of the FIFA mechanisms and regulations that underpin such a case, as you said, are currently suspended, like the agents chamber. Two, This appears to relate to a pre-FFAR agent matter, and it's unclear then where such a dispute will be heard. And finally, three, one thing that confused me about the report and the article on this is that it says this relates to a dispute resolution chamber of the league, the PSL, and not the National Association. So it's a bit baffling to me on so many levels.
Yes, some very interesting points you raised there, Jonathan. One, as you said, the league has a dispute resolution body. Normally, it's a DRC or dispute resolution chamber within National Association or Federation. This is a very interesting angle because we never see many leagues have this option of dealing with disputes. I mean, hypothetically, should the European Champions League have a chamber? Maybe not. But what about major leagues like the EPL, La Liga, Serie A, especially since the FFAR, the agents chamber, has been suspended? People need dispute resolution. Should the league step in? Normally it's a federation thing. But is it a new trend or maybe it's just a unique set of circumstances in South Africa? This is an interesting discussion that going forward everyone should have. Should leagues also have some sort of outlet for disputes?
I think beyond that, there's one thing that quite often gets forgotten, and I know it's important to both you and I, is that whilst we talk about clubs, agents, players, associations, and even FIFA in such disputes, the one thing that goes unnoticed in a lot of this is that there's people involved, there's careers, there's livelihoods, there's their well-being, their health. And that's often forgotten about, especially by some of the football authorities at times, either due to agendas, self preservation, and in some cases, a comfortable position with a guaranteed salary. But this perception by many that all agents are wealthy, Rolex wearing, Range Rover driving individuals with legal means to fight their corner in such a dispute is wrong because, in the majority of cases, as we've said many times, that just isn't the case. And it's hard enough to fight your corner and survive as an agent, especially as an independent or with a smaller agency, which many agents fall into that category. But then that becomes almost impossible when you don't even know when, where, or how you can fight and resolve such disputes. Whether it be national associations with their arbitration procedures, DRCs, NDRCs, FIFA, the Agents Chamber, CAS, or even through the courts. And that has a really serious impact on many agents in terms of their livelihood, their personal and their family life, and ultimately their health, both mental and physical, when they seemingly have nowhere to turn in these situations. And I'll be quite honest and say I got to a point where it was affecting my health so badly that I had to step away from it all. And I've heard some really awful stories over the years regarding agents who've racked up huge debts due to not getting paid what they are rightly due, whose family situation has broken down, or even some cases where they've contemplated the ultimate. And with the confusion and uncertainty caused by FFAR over many years now, and now the suspension of such things as the agents chamber, how many agents are stuck in a situation where they find themselves in dispute, probably can't get paid what they are due, and seemingly have nowhere to turn?
Many agents do not make enough money from the business at least on a continuous basis. It could be window to window, but in the day, a lot of agents are not making enough money. So when you're owed money, you're faced with the question, where do you go in terms of resolution? Is it worth suing for the amount of money you're looking to seek or reclaim? And how long does it take? We're a fast moving business. Things need to move quickly. And that is an important consideration as well. Ultimately, litigation is very stressful and also damages, as you said, Jonathan, relationships, mindsets, people's psychology, and really hurts not just the agents, but people around them. And what I will say, I mean, I spoke to one of the agents and he's owed money from 30, 40 clubs in Asia. So what does he do? Does he go to some of the national associations to see if he can get his money? Is he able to go to FIFA? No, he can't go to FIFA. That's not available. He's an Australian agent. Can he come back to Australia and do anything? It's unlikely. And this agent's got a young family. But also, you've got to look at, and I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, if you start being known, especially in Asia, but all markets, that someone who sues clubs for commissions, because some clubs see the pecking order of who gets paid, maybe agents are more towards the bottom, That's not good for your reputation, and it's a reputation game. So you're caught in a very, very difficult situation. Yes, a lot of agents get paid, have good relationships, can follow through, but there are a lot of agents who are owed money and have to forego that money because the resolution is a decision. Do they litigate or do they just take the hit because they don't want to damage their relationships? Also, the agent associations, I think here, this is a key point for me, need to step up a little bit, especially now where there's a vacuum with the agents chamber, especially in terms of overdue payables or not being paid their commissions. This is done by the PFA for the players. They provide an in-house lawyer, in-house legal service. I can't see why the involvement of agent associations shouldn't have that offering. And with all these gaps, something that's necessary in our agents industry, Jonathan.
You're absolutely right on that fact about the agents associations because FIFA, many of the national associations need to do more on this, as do the agents associations. And those agents associations need to do more whether the agents who are stuck in this predicament are their members or not. But in relation to that, there were some encouraging signs in the week, well, in my view anyway, as we possibly have some clarity from another National Football Association and also an additional football association seemingly making some very encouraging process to support licensed football agents.
Start with one of the associations. That's the Austrian Football Association, the OFB, who published their new football agent regulations a few days after the German Football Association, the DFB. We covered that in the last episodes. And they are looking at challenging a little bit the FIFA football agent regulations, who the inception has been a little bit controversial because there are certain questions that have to be answered at the European Court of Justice, and we've discussed that. But going back to the Austrian regulations, they've been revised, but they also have taken into account the interim injunction, I believe, of the Dortmund Regional Court, one of the two German courts that referred the matter to the European Court of Justice. Now, the Austrian FA has issued new regulations to ensure more professional work by player agents or football agents who deal with footballers, clubs, and stakeholders. These regulations are entering into the upcoming transfer period, which is January 2025, and so all agreements pretty much have to align with those new regulations. I'll go with a few key points from the Austrian football agent regulations. Football agents must conclude a written representative agreement with their clients, maximum 2 years. So pretty much FFAR. Clients also need to be informed that they can get independent legal advice on that agreement, similar to FFAR. Representation of minors is only permitted after completion of the unique course provided by FIFA. We know that's the CPD course. This is the key one. There are no fee caps or requirements regarding debtors or payment terms, and payment should not be made through the FIFA clearinghouse. Very interesting. So they've gone against the FFAR in relation to that, and I know the fee caps are suspended, but no fee caps in Austria. The fee, although, has to be set out in the agency agreement. You can't avoid that. The interesting thing and the distinguishing from the German, even though these countries are close, Germany and Austria, exclusive agency agreements are permitted and must be respected by other agents. So Austria allows exclusivity in agents agreements. And the final element is there is a code of conduct also for the national Austrian regulations for agents. So some interesting developments there in Austria, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think I've probably said enough recently on the need for clarity on agent regulations. And in their defence, some national football associations have really been caught in what I see as a crossfire between certain agents and FIFA in many of the territories. And some have been trying to appease everyone over this, whether it be FIFA or the agents. And I'll probably get shot down in flames for this by some. Not least as some of those people seize on any opportunity to almost attack national football associations for implementing agent licensing and regulation in light of the FFAR, if only the actual target is a sideways swipe at FIFA. But I maintain that everyone needs a sensible, effective, and fair global framework for agent regulations. And from that framework, the national associations can, in effect, hang their own variations for domestic matters.
This is a very interesting, and we're going to go into a second association that's made a very interesting initiative. But before I do that, Just want to mention that I just received a copy of the New Zealand football agent regulations. I haven't had a chance to read it. I'm very interested to see how they're articulated and how they follow the FFAR. We know there are two clubs in the Australian A-League from New Zealand who are doing very well, Auckland and Wellington. So there's scope for agents there. But now we're moving to our second National Association initiative, and that's Jonathan, your association, your local association, the FA, the Football Association, who've brought in digital IDs. So a new digital ID card from the FA, where they've emailed everyone registered with them or licensed with them on how to get that digital card. And it's about providing additional transparency. That's the goal or philosophy around this sort of digital card. And the Football Association is partnering with, I think it's ID 123 to introduce digital identification for all FA registered football agents. ID 123, I want to get too technical, is a platform that provides a method of verifying digital IDs, and it's downloadable to any smartphone. So they're using technology and easy access. I have to say, I'm quite impressed. I have downloaded mine and set it up because you use the registration information that the FA does have, your name, your registration number, whether you can represent minors or not in England. And also it's got your photo, you upload a photo, signature, and there's also a protective hologram. So it's a little bit different maybe to the FIFA license, the electronic digital ID. And I think I'm quite impressed, Jonathan.
Yeah, when I got this email from the FA on these digital IDs, I wasn't expecting much because I've had almost 15 years of disappointment from the English FA on agent-related matters. So yes, they are my home association, but whether they want to take ownership of me, I'll leave that up to them. But on looking at it, I was pleasantly surprised by these digital IDs. And in actually going through the process, I'm quite impressed with the initial steps they've taken. Maybe the apple has finally dropped from Newton's tree, and those who know will get that reference. But as everyone knows, I am not and never have been a fan of the simply laughable FIFA digital IDs for licensed agents. But these from the FA, in my view, are far, far better. Yes, they can be manipulated with time and effort, but it is far more difficult to do that with these IDs from the FA than with FIFA's shoddy digital IDs. Yes, I have some questions, if not doubts, over some aspects of these IDs from the FA, but they're very, very minor ones. And from speaking to other agents in the last week or so, since the IDs were announced, I think they're due to come into play on the 16th of December officially. I know some people, agents, are very skeptical about using them for a variety of reasons. Some are reasonable reservations, some not so reasonable, and some downright ludicrous ones. But for me, the crucial thing will be with these is the implementation, which thus far seems to have been good, but also the development and how they integrate these with other elements. As the FA have previously implemented things and left them to effectively wither on the vine and become pretty pointless in the past. But crucially, education and awareness. And I don't just mean agents here, I mean clubs, players, club officials, parents, leagues, even scouts. Firstly, need to be aware that these digital IDs exist and how to check if one is valid. As we can't go back to times that I remember when the likes of Premier League academy directors don't even know how to check if an agent is licensed or know that a register of licensed agents even existed at the time. And agents also have a role to play in this as well, to promote the existence of these IDs. And even if you're not asked for your ID by a club official or a parent you've never met before, for example, show them your ID. It grows that awareness.
It certainly does. It becomes customary that sooner or later, as more agents show their ID, clubs, football directors, as you said, players, coaches will start recognizing that this is something they need to ask or be shown. So it's a practice. It becomes a custom, it becomes a habit. I recall when the former FIFA agent regulations, pre-2015, working with intermediaries way before that, we used to have an ID card. It was issued by the Australian Association. And that was a good thing because when you go to Asia, they do like some sort of identification where you sit in amongst the industry. And when showing your card, they gave you not so much prestige, but it gave it an introductory to the business of that country, opened some doors, and you're able to talk to different people within clubs. Now, back then, stakeholders, clubs, players would pay attention to the ID. That was a long time ago and actually was more of a plastic ID that was issued, not so much a digital ID as we have now. And maybe hopefully more national associations do bring IDs into the fore because I think it's important as an introductory note in the business and also transparency, identification, and knowing who you're dealing with and whether you can deal with minors or not. If it's on the card, the digital ID, it's clear that you can speak with parents and minors, Jonathan.
You've gone showing off again about the plastic card that the Australian Federation gave you, haven't you? Because you remember what I told you about the agent ID card the English FA used to issue, which is why
Oh,
this
good
is such a
times,
step
Jonathan.
forward. It was a
Oh,
piece of
good
paper.
times.
It was a piece of paper. It was laminated and it wasn't even cut straight. And if you lost it, they charged you to issue a new one. It was almost embarrassing to present it. So credit where credit's due on this one. Definite step forward. But on the matter of the FIFA digital IDs, there are cases that have come to light already of these being faked and people representing themselves as licensed agents when they're not actually licensed agents. And there's quite a bit of concern about that amongst some agents. So, folks, don't go posting your FA digital ID on social media. Yes, they're more difficult to replicate and manipulate than FIFA's digital IDs, but just please don't give the fake agents and the fraudsters a head start on this. But on the subject of social media, and in particular LinkedIn, which is where I've seen, as I said, a fair few FIFA digital IDs posted over the past weeks and months, there's been a deluge of commentary on football agent industry matters over the last year. And so I just wanted to pick out a few of these that we've both noted, Peter, just to reflect on. And I hate the term expert. I don't call myself an expert on agent matters or even sports mediation, as there are people who have far more knowledge in specific areas of the industry than I do. And there is, of course, yourself on legal aspects, Peter. And on the agents angle, we've had guests on the show such as Rafaela Pimenta, Colin Gordon, and Barry Siltman, hugely experienced agents in some big deals. And then we've had Paolo Lombardi and Tarek Ajanovic, both former FIFA people, who know much of the regulations regarding agents and other matters inside out. But in the age of FFAR, there does seem to be a growth in football agency so-called experts. And not all of their insights are as clear-cut as they profess to be in their opinions and their comments. The first, and forgive me here, Peter, as I'm going to have another dig at some lawyers who see the black and white of the regulations from the likes of FIFA, and they seemingly lack a real understanding of the practicalities surrounding the football agents industry and the football agents world. And the comment was as follows. For those aspiring to become licensed FIFA agents, it's crucial to note that providing agent services without obtaining the license is prohibited. If FIFA becomes aware of such actions, it may impose a 2-year ban on applying for a license. FIFA has already published several decisions by the General Secretariat. Well, in response to this, I think it is really a short-sighted regulation from FIFA in the first case, if not combined effectively with other regulations and sanctions. Because if someone is charged with operating as an unlicensed agent and you ban them from being a licensed agent for 2 years, what's really been achieved? Apart from almost guaranteeing that that same person will then be operating as an unlicensed agent for another 2 years. But this is back into the realms of good intentions and poor execution, as we pointed out to FIFA a few years ago now.
Yes, Jonathan, I mean, it's about execution. You're right. And you want to disqualify people. It's very hard to get rid of a lot of the fake agents or the unlicensed agents. I mean, I'll give you one example, and this has happened just recently, last few days, and I don't want to talk too much about Australia, but us at the Australian Football Agents Association, which includes the Oceania members, New Zealand, etc., we sent out a circular to all the football stakeholders warning them about the dangers to use unlicensed agents. That included the A-League, Football Australia, the FA, clubs, the PFA. We have a strong PFA here, Players Union. And we think education is just as important as is enforcement and compliance. And you mentioned this observation here on LinkedIn. I think sometimes that misses a little bit the point. But I'll say something else, Jonathan. Also, FIFPro, the PFA are a member of, need to get active here as well a little bit about fake agents and unlicensed agents. And we know that a lot of financial regulators around the world have new websites warning investors about scams. The same thing needs also, FIFPro need to take an active approach, I think, of putting up names of unregistered agents who are affecting players. And that doesn't have to just be FIFPro, but it can be the FAs as well in different countries, the National Association. Of course, privacy may be an issue. However, protection of players, agents who do the right thing that are licensed is fundamental in this business. And so, of course, that is important. And that's why some people post these things on LinkedIn and say, oh, this is how we deal with unlicensed agents and all that. But you need to have better initiatives. And it's not just FIFA who can regulate this, but it's other stakeholders to take action. I think FIFPro play a role, the national associations play a role, and by working all together, we're able to abolish the scourge of fake agents, which is a big one in Africa, and unlicensed agents all around the world, Jonathan.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. The next comment or post I saw seemed to be what I would say is a bit of a fishing expedition in my view, as it was someone who is seemingly a former player and is an agent, or at least works for an agency, so shouldn't really have the need to post such a thing, as they should really have better understanding of the situation. And the post was as follows. My son is fortunate. He's an under 16 footballer in an academy system. At the end of November, along with his teammates and friends, he will be told whether or not he will have a scholarship for a future 2 years at this club. For those that get released, under the regulations of being an agent, these young players cannot reach out for advice to specialists, as that is what we are in our field. Even then, come January, to find a good agent takes time, positive meetings, and most definitely the building of trust to collaborate and make the right decisions for a young player's future, both on and off the pitch. Make this make sense, as it doesn't make any to me. And I really wanted to respond to this post, but I chose not to, as I didn't want to feed a seeming fishing expedition. But that's just me being cynical. What do you think, Peter?
Look, I have mixed feelings about this post, Jonathan. Yes, agents can assist younger players, and we know we've talked about it so much. We've got the CPD, and even the FA has now just talked about it on the digital license who can deal with minors, and there's protections in place with dealing with minors. Now, in this day and age, it is about information, where you go for information. Now, I think with this post, something's missing. Yes, all these players may be let go or get a scholarship, but one thing that a lot of people don't understand, it's very hard to get an opportunity in the professional pathway as a young player. Yes, ask an agent what they think and what agents can do for younger players. You don't have to sign with an agent as a parent and a younger player at that age of 16. And agents can give advice, but also, a lot of younger players listen to what coaches say. That's a counter narrative that you don't need an agent at that time. And I think the post, yes, it posts something that is a bit of a quandary for younger players at that age, at the academy level, but it misses for me one key point, that as you come towards professionalism, not many players are going to make professional. And I just saw a post recently that this is the English context. It's a staggering 97% of former Category 1 academy players, now aged 21 to 26, never made an English Premier League appearance. So besides how to deal with minors, there's also the pathway stats that are sometimes forgotten, and not all players are going to get an opportunity. Enjoy the game. Yes, agents can provide some insights, but to say, oh, I can't approach an agent or the rules, end of the day, if you're a good player, an agent will find you, or vice versa.
Personally, I don't think the poster's representation of the regulations is 100% accurate. And I think the biggest mistake is probably taking the regulations too literally, in my view. And that's a mistake made by many newer agents. And I'll be quite honest and say I've been guilty of that in the past. Now, for me on this one, there's nothing to stop an agent offering advice to the player and their family, so long as one, there's no signed agreement or pre-agreement. Two, there's no commission or payment for that advice. Three, the agent does not initiate the approach. And finally, the big thing here is that we're not talking about actual representation, we're talking about advice. Yes, some agents would help as part of their own personal moral duty, and many agents are guilty of giving away far too many freebies. And others would do it in the hope that the family and the player will remember the advice they got and come back to the agent when the player is old enough to have an agent. Best of luck waiting for that one. But as I said, in essence, it's all down to your interpretation and understanding of the rules and regulations, as well as good safeguarding knowledge when it comes to minors, rather than just knowing the answers to 10 random multiple choice questions.
That is very true, Jonathan. It comes down to the way you approach your business and the way you deal with younger players. And look, a lot of agents know if they can take a player who's 16, 17 to the professional ranks, they will give advice. Sometimes the advice is not pretty, but agents will assist. Not all, but there is enough information out there to give parents and their kids or the players, the younger players, that advice. Now, I do agree with one thing you've said there as well. I think safeguarding is in terms of the FFAR has been a very important move. One of the good things that FIFA have introduced with their regulation, it's a really important area ensuring players and their families are protected, and also that agents understand that their actions have consequences, especially when dealing with minors. But also, you've got to deal with expectations. And as I mentioned before, the professional pathway is a very difficult one. And that's one thing that has to be managed. And everyone needs to know that it's not easy to make it, regardless if you're a top player at 16.
And finally, a really, really naive post in my view, and I think understandably it's been seemingly deleted since. And I can understand the poster's view on this, as it is reminiscent of many people who enter the agents industry who have a preconceived idea of the industry, want to be whiter than white, and change the agent's world while they're at it. But as you get more experienced, you understand that all of that is not possible for a variety of reasons. And this post was as follows. The football agency landscape is changing. With FIFA's new agent license, we have seen an influx of new agencies popping up. And this brings new life and energy into the ecosystem, something that I personally welcome. This new generation get things the old agents don't. Data-driven insights for player recruitment, innovative business strategies, better understanding of brand identity, nil for athletes, the importance of social channels. Sport is entertainment. Perhaps the days of agents shouting insults down the phone at you are now numbered. Let's hope this is a step in the right direction. Bye bye, old boy network. Thoughts on that one, Peter? I'll let you start.
I don't mean to laugh, and I don't want to laugh. I mean, you've mentioned nil for athletes. That's obviously American concept of name, image, likeness that we're seeing in college athletes
It's
and all
exactly
that.
the same in other territories, whether it be
Yes.
image rights or whatever.
Yeah. So image rights, obviously, for athletes is probably what we use more here in the UK and some other countries. But yeah, I get your point. I wasn't happy about this post, Jonathan. And you know me, I'm very transparent, very fair, and I want to humor and laugh and all that. But the debate between new agents with data insights and fresh perspective versus old school agents, it's a debate we hear all the time. It's a very similar debate we hear about old school scouts, which I've got a lot of respect for, by the data driven scouts and analysts. That's another debate. But one thing I don't like about this post, you've got to know your history before you make, your future. Most of the pioneering agents, the old school agents, they changed the paradigm of the agency business, the representation business, because a lot of these old school agents got creative. They didn't just stick to a very old fashioned way of doing things. So they always evolved new ideas and brought new creative approaches to the business. Now, you mentioned name, image, likeness, and brand and channels. That's all a bit simplistic for me. Yes, brand's very important, especially in this day of social media. However, in the agent's business, the elements of old school negotiation, connections, and respects forged through deal making, deals, track record, as well as adding the elements of branding and proactive approaches to player management, that's where it's at. It's a mix. You just can't cut the old school out. The old school agents do not go away. They evolve with the market. And I think this post is a little bit simplistic and, in a way, unfair to the old school agents who built this industry, Jonathan.
And that's from somebody who's very, very forgiving and will see both sides of the argument all the time rather than just give something a kicking like I will. But as I said, Peter, I've found the post just hugely naive. The first point about influx of new agents popping up. I don't think so. In fact, numbers have reportedly decreased with FFAR. And if you want to talk about an influx of agents, speak to any agent from pre 2015 about the introduction of RWWI, the regulations on working with intermediaries in 2015, and the influx of intermediaries then, which technically were agents just by another name. That's point one. The new agents get things old agents don't. I think they're in for a rude awakening there, as well as the established agents, and especially the big agencies, are very much at the forefront of using data, social channels and nil and image rights. That's why those big agents and those big agencies are still around and probably more successful than ever. And the final comment of bye bye old boy network. Well, my immediate reaction was that's certainly a way of painting a target on yourself. That's if the established big agents are in the slightest bit bothered by such comments. And that is maybe why the poster has experienced insults down the phone. And in essence, networking is all important in football, not least the agents' world. And it will remain just as important as it always has been. And people will maintain those preferred relationships in the industry in order to get deals done for their clients.
That's correct, Jonathan. We're seeing a transition of some former players moving into agency. Obviously, we're seeing mega mergers with bigger agencies. Yes, there's a lot of change, but it is, as you said, a preferred agent's business. And more importantly, Jonathan, who is picking up the phone? Who's ringing you? Or I should say, WhatsApping you? Yes, some agents lose their cool or have an assertive temperament, but the end goal is the same. What is the best deal you can get for your player? And a lot of agents, especially the old school agents, know the value of players, know the way to use a negotiation or to use different clubs' interests in order to promote their players' interest. And those skills are very difficult to obtain. Yes, we've got new technologies, new data. However, it's a relationship business and will remain a relationships business. It might pivot to a few different new areas, but it's all about who you know, players you have. You got to have the product. You got to have the portfolio of players, and that is also very important. So we're not going to see that much of a change. The old school agents will remain. There'll be new agents coming on board who will do very well. The business will evolve. But I will say this, you just can't say, bye bye old boys network. I think that, as you say, is not the right wording. And the post was poor, in my opinion. And sometimes people, they want to say their view, but you've got to be careful because the agents world's also small and people know each other and you can easily miss out on opportunities if you're too, I suppose, aloof to what's going on, Jonathan.
And so, with that, it brings us towards the end of this episode and towards the end of the year for the Agents Angle. But just before we finish this episode, Peter, we've asked a question to many of our guests over this season and the season before as to one wish they have for the football agents industry. So, what is your wish for the agents industry in 2025?
I was wishing you didn't ask me this question,
Okay,
but
that's your wish. We'll leave it at that then.
no, I'll answer it, but I'm going to bend the question. I have three small wishes which make up one big wish. That's okay. I hope the European Court of Justice finalise decision on agents soon, the FFAR, in other words. I think that's vital for our business. We need to draw a line in the sand where we're going with regulation. I also think, as another small wish, it's time for agent associations to cross the divide and get active with their offerings. I mentioned helping agents being able to retrieve money they're owed. However, I think the agent associations need to expand their offerings and get more assertive. I haven't seen that. I hope that happens going forward. And one other thing, I'd like to see more data and insights on agencies and agents in the business, not just how it's evolving under FFAR, but as a business itself and the landscape. I know their CIS Football Observatory do a lot of good research on players and clubs. They do it very well. I want to see a little bit more cutting edge and compelling, properly factual though, and well researched and well detailed information on the agent space, especially data insights, trends, and what's going on out there, Jonathan. They're my wishes. There's three, but maybe to summarize it, let's keep improving the business. Jonathan, your wish?
I echo your sentiment about the agents associations, which is quite nuanced. And we're talking the three main associations primarily. I know a lot of the national associations are very active. I think they've got to start doing what they say they're going to do. They've got to start walking the walk rather than talking the talk. I think they've got to find that middle ground because there's far more that they agree on, that they disagree on, that they clash on, that they bicker about. And I think that would be progress because they're doing the agents no interest whatsoever. And even a memorandum of understanding between them on what they can agree. And the second wish is quite simple. FIFA to see sense. Stop stalling. Let's have some progress. Let's have some real progress on this. There's key things in the FFAR that we're now looking at 2 years on, and we're waiting on the ECJ decision. And it's affecting people. It's affecting clubs. It's affecting players. It's affecting agents and all those around them. So my main wish would be to see sense in that area and just at least have some progress because I don't think anybody's benefiting at the moment.
Fair points there. Fair observations, Jonathan. And to end our last episode for this year, as we're heading into the transfer window, and we'll put this in the show notes. I'll put the link in that FIFA has, and I've mentioned this before, streamlined the transfer window dates tool. And that can be very useful for this summer. Sorry, summer is in Australia, but the winter window in Europe. And we'll put that in. There's a transfer window tool that FIFA has got on its football regulatory page. Now, for the new year, there's a lot going on, but I'll just mention an event that's happening next week. The FIFA Agents Working Group is meeting on, I think it's 17th December 2024, Jonathan. Let's hope we get some fuller updates.
Don't ask me. I'm never invited, as if that's a surprise for anyone.
Well, I'll be chasing updates up, that's for sure. So the FAWG, the FIFA Agents Working Group, is meeting this month. I don't believe it's in person. I believe it's on one of the platforms, Teams or Zoom. Let's hope we get some more updates of what's going on out there. I'll remind everyone to vote for the Sports Podcast Awards. We really would appreciate listeners to vote for us. And that's it for the year. Bye from me.
Yes, folks. And even if this seasonal period is not one you regularly celebrate, I think if we had another wish, it'd probably be goodwill to people within the industry, across football, whether it be agent to agent. Don't go shouting down the phone at anyone. And to those who do celebrate it, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas. Yes, Merry Christmas from me as well to everyone's family, friends, and best of health as well for the new year, Jonathan. Bye from me.
The purpose of the Agents Angle podcast is to provide news, information and facilitate discussion on regulatory matters, policies, business trends and issues affecting football agents worldwide. The opinions and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only and should never be considered legal or professional advice. Furthermore, the views expressed by guests are their own and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Thank you for listening.